I used to love summers. At least, I did once. Every July, my parents would drop me off at my grandparents' old farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania. 40 acres of land, half woods, half memories. It wasn't the kind of place where you heard cars or neighbors, just the hum of cicadas and the faint creak of a weather-worn porch that sounded alive in the night. My grandparents were kind but quiet people. Grandpa spent most of his time in the fields. Grandma baked, prayed, and went to bed before the sun was fully down. By 9 o'clock, the whole house fell silent, and that silence had its own weight. The attic was mine. It had slanted ceilings, walls lined with old trunks, and a single window that faced a sea of black trees. My dad told me it used to be his room when he was my age. That detail made it feel special at first. The first summer passed peacefully. I read comic books under a flashlight, stayed up whispering to myself, trying not to wake the house. The second summer, things changed. One night, while reading beneath my blanket, I heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps climbing the narrow stairs to the attic. They stopped right outside my door. Then the doorknob turned just slightly, and the door opened about 6 inches. I killed my flashlight and froze, pretending to sleep. For a long minute, there was nothing. No retreating footsteps, no whisper, no closing door. Just the sound of my heartbeat and the faint ticking of Grandma's clock 2 floors down. When I told Grandpa at breakfast, he laughed and said, "Old houses talk. Sometimes raccoons get into the walls." He said it kindly, but I knew those weren't raccoon footsteps. I'd heard the wood bend beneath human weight. 3 nights later, I woke to the mattress trembling beneath me. Someone was standing at the foot of my bed. I could make out a shape, tall, still, almost patient. I didn't scream. I just shut my eyes and counted to 100. When I opened them again, the figure was gone, but the closet door was wide open. I hadn't opened it since I arrived. The next morning, I convinced myself it was Grandma checking on me, but a part of me already knew it wasn't her. The air around that closet felt colder than the rest of the room. After that, small things kept happening. Books moved from one side of the desk to the other. My flashlight batteries drained overnight. Sometimes, when I was almost asleep, I'd hear faint humming, a woman's voice, just beneath the attic floorboards. When I told Grandma about it, she smiled without meeting my eyes and said, "Old houses remember, sweetheart." I didn't understand what she meant. By the second week, I was terrified of the nights. I started going to bed earlier just to skip the fear. Still, I'd wake around 3 a.m., heart racing, certain that someone had been standing beside my bed again.
Eventually, my parents stopped sending me there. Life went on. I grew up, moved away, and tried to forget that attic. Then, years later, both my grandparents passed away within weeks of each other. The funeral brought the family back together, and with it came old memories I'd tried to bury. That's where I saw my cousin, Marco. We were the same age, but barely knew each other. He always went to the farmhouse in August, after my visits ended. While standing outside after the funeral, I finally mentioned it, the attic, the footsteps, the figure in the dark. He went pale, didn't laugh, didn't call me crazy. He just said quietly, "You heard it too?" Then he told me something that made my stomach turn. When he stayed at the farmhouse, the same thing would happen. But for him, it didn't stop at footsteps. He said the figure would sit at the edge of his bed, He could feel the mattress sink, and cold, rough fingers would trace the outline of his face. Sometimes it grabbed his wrist and held it until dawn. He never opened his eyes because he knew it wasn't Grandma. He said he'd told his mom, but she brushed it off, said he was dreaming, just like my family did to me. So he stopped mentioning it. Instead, he lay still every night, waiting for the thing to leave. You could smell it, like damp wood and burnt matches. Listening to him, I realized that whatever haunted me hadn't been my imagination. It was real, and it had been there long before either of us.
After the funeral, Marco and I decided to visit the old house one last time. It felt wrong, but we needed to see it. The front door was still unlocked. No one had lived there since the funeral. When we climbed to the attic, the air felt heavier, like the house knew we were back. The floorboards groaned, and the single window still faced that same endless forest. The glass was fogged from the inside, even though the day was warm. There were scratches on the window frame, thin, uneven lines that looked like they'd been carved by fingernails. Marco ran his hand over them and whispered, "It stood right here." I wanted to leave, but something in me made me step closer to the window. That's when I saw it. In the reflection, a faint outline standing behind us. When I turned around, nothing was there, but the smell of damp wood and burnt matches filled the room. We left without saying a word. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the creak of those attic stairs in my dreams. Other times, I'll wake up with my wrist aching for no reason. I don't talk to Marco much anymore. We both know that some stories are better left in the dark. But every now and then, when the wind rattles my bedroom window just right, I think I hear it, that soft humming beneath the floorboards. And I remember what Grandma said. Old houses remember, sweetheart. Maybe she wasn't warning me about the house. Maybe she was warning me about what lives inside memories themselves.
When I was 11, we lived on the edge of a small town. The kind of place where the streetlights always seemed a little too far apart. Our house sat across from an old boarded-up home everyone called the Keller place. No one had lived there for as long as I could remember, but every kid in the neighborhood had a story about it. Most said it was haunted. Some swore they'd seen movement behind the top floor window. I didn't believe any of them until that summer. It started the week we moved into our new house. My room faced directly toward the Keller place. Every night before sleeping, I'd glance through my window, half curious, half bored. The curtains over there were always drawn, faded blue, with one corner pinned up like someone once peeked out and never bothered to fix it. Then, one night, I noticed a shape behind those curtains, a small, still silhouette, like someone standing and watching. I remember whispering, probably my reflection, but reflections don't blink. A few nights later, lightning flashed, and for a split second, I saw her clearly. A girl, about my age, pale, hair hanging to her shoulders, standing motionless behind that window. When the thunder rolled, I ran downstairs to tell Mom. She laughed, said I'd been reading too many ghost stories and told me the old house was empty, condemned years ago. Still, when she tucked me in, she left the hallway light on. That night, I dreamt of the girl. She wasn't scary in the dream, just sad. She kept mouthing something I couldn't hear. When I woke, my window was fogged from the inside, and someone had drawn a handprint on the glass. It was smaller than mine. A week passed. I started sleeping with the blinds down, but curiosity always won. Every night at around 2:30 a.m., I'd peek, and every time she was there, still, staring, waiting. Then came the knocking. 3 soft taps. Tap, tap, tap. Not from my door, but from the window. When I turned, there was no one outside, but the glass trembled as if something small and cold had pressed against it. I ran to my parents' room. Dad checked the yard, the porch, the trees. Nothing. Not even footprints in the dew. When he came back inside, he said, "Probably the wind." But we both knew, wind doesn't knock in patterns.
One afternoon, I found a dusty shoebox filled with old photographs. Most were yellowed and curling, snapshots of neighbors, family barbecues, faded faces. At the bottom was a Polaroid labeled Keller Family, 1983. A man, a woman, and a young girl stood in front of that same blue-curtained window. The girl looked exactly like the one I'd seen. Same haircut, same pale expression, but the date on the back was 10 years before I was born. That night, I couldn't bring myself to close my eyes. The moment I did, I'd see her standing there, blinking in and out of the lightning. 2 nights later, I woke up to a faint creak, like a window being opened. I thought it was the wind again until I felt the cold air crawling across my room. My own window was wide open, and written across the fogged glass of the opposite house were 3 words, traced by a finger. "Come play now." I froze. For the first time, I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, I grabbed my blanket and ran to the hallway, only to find my parents' door half open. Both of them were standing there, looking toward my room. Mom's voice shook as she whispered, "We heard someone talking." But it wasn't me. The next morning, Dad went to check the old house himself. He returned within 5 minutes, pale and silent. He said the front door was still locked, covered in dust, but in the upstairs window, the curtain had been ripped down, and beneath it, a fresh child's footprint in the layer of dirt on the floorboards. He didn't let me sleep in that room again. We moved a month later. I'm 27 now, living in a city where the nights hum instead of whisper. But sometimes, when I walk past tall buildings, I still catch my reflection in the glass, and for half a second, I see her standing beside me, smiling faintly. Every phone I've owned, every mirror I pass, there's always a chance light catches wrong, and that same pale face flickers back into view. I've tried to forget the Keller house, but every year around the same week in July, I wake to that same sound, tap, 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 on my window. And every time I look, the handprint is smaller than mine. If this story made you close your window tonight, you should definitely hear the others, because sometimes it's not the dark outside that's watching.